Rain fell in relentless sheets, blurring the world into gray. Headlights cut through the downpour as trucks crawled along the flooded road, tires sinking into mud. Somewhere ahead, beyond the sound of engines and thunder, came a cry, high, sharp, and trembling. It wasn't human, but it carried the same ache. Claire Weston gripped the steering wheel tighter. She had heard that sound before, the sound of something pleading not to be left behind. When they reached the old quarry, the ground was slick with water and loose earth. Flashlights wavered across the darkness, catching glimpses of twisted fence wire and shattered posts. "She's down there," someone shouted. Claire jumped from the truck, boots sinking deep as she followed the voice. Rain soaked her through, but she barely noticed. Her pulse steadied the way it always did on nights like this. The stillness before she met the eyes of something fighting to survive. At the base of the slope, half buried in mud, lay a mare. Her chest rose shallowly, every breath a struggle. Her coat, once chestnut, was darkened by wet earth, and her hind leg was trapped under a fallen beam. Claire's heart clenched. She'd seen dozens like her over the years, but the sight never hardened her. "Get the jacks ready," she called. The team moved quickly, their breath visible in the cold. Then she saw it. A small, trembling form pressed against the mare's neck. A foal, barely a few weeks old, nudging desperately, trying to rouse its mother. Its cries broke through the storm, raw and pleading. When one of the rescuers stepped forward, the foal spun and stamped, ears flat, eyes wild with terror. It stood between them and the mare like a tiny, shaking guardian. "Easy," Claire murmured, crouching low, her voice soft but sure. The foal froze, nostrils flaring. Lightning flashed, and for an instant their eyes met, one full of fear, the other full of memory. She slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out a red bandana, frayed at the edges. Years ago, it had belonged to her mare, Ember, lost in a flood not unlike this one. Claire had carried it ever since. She held it out, letting the foal catch her scent through the rain. "Let me help her," she whispered. The foal's trembling eased just slightly. Claire took a slow step closer. The mare lifted her head weakly, eyes half open, a soft nicker barely audible over the storm. Claire knelt beside her, brushing mud from her face, whispering reassurances that felt as much for herself as for the horse. "You're safe now. We've got you." The rescue team worked methodically, sliding straps beneath the mare, shifting the beam inch by inch. Every movement felt endless, the storm pressing down with cruel persistence. Claire kept her hand on the mare's neck, murmuring whenever panic rippled through her muscles. The foal never moved far, circling, watching, crying when the light flickered too close. When at last the beam was lifted free, the mare let out a long, shuddering breath. Her eyes found Claire's, heavy with exhaustion. "We've got her," one rescuer said, but Claire didn't answer. The mare's breathing slowed, uneven. The foal pushed against her side, as if trying to lend her strength. "Hang on," Claire whispered. She could feel the tremor of the mare's heartbeat under her palm. Faint, stubborn, fading. The vet checked her pulse, met Claire's eyes, and shook his head. Claire swallowed hard. The sound that followed silenced everyone, a low, keening cry from the foal, rising to the rain like grief itself. The wind stilled for a moment. The storm's roar softened, as though listening. Claire gathered the foal close, letting it tremble against her chest. "She's gone," she whispered, her voice breaking into the rain. Around them, the rescue lights dimmed, painting the mud in gold and shadow. The foal lifted his head then, eyes bright with something that wasn't fear anymore, just need. Claire felt it, sharp and certain. This night wasn't an ending. It was a beginning she hadn't been ready for, but one she couldn't turn away from. Dawn came slow and muted, the kind of gray that made sound feel softer. The storm had passed, leaving the rescue barn wrapped in a hush that was almost reverent. The smell of wet hay and antiseptic lingered in the air. Claire moved quietly down the aisle, boots scuffing against damp boards. Each stall held a story of survival. Fractured bones, rain-drenched hides, the aftermath of desperation. But it was the last stall that pulled her forward. The mare lay still beneath thick blankets, her sides rising faintly, every breath a fragile victory. Beside her, the foal stood pressed close, small body quivering, head bent toward her mother's neck. Claire leaned on the doorframe, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle deep in her bones. She hadn't changed clothes since last night. Her hands still smelled faintly of mud and fear. Dr. James, the team's vet, looked up from where he knelt by the mare's flank. His voice was low, steady. She made it through the night, barely, but her legs in bad shape. Might never bear full weight again. He paused, glancing toward the foal. The little one hasn't eaten since the rescue. Won't take milk. She's waiting for her mother. Claire nodded, jaw tight. Then we keep her waiting company. She entered the stall slowly, her movements measured, gentle. The foal shifted, uncertain, but didn't back away. Claire lowered herself to the straw, sitting cross-legged near them, and reached for the mare's muzzle. The horse's breath was warm against her palm, damp and uneven. For hours, the barn existed in a kind of suspended stillness. The creak of rafters, the occasional rattle of wind through the loose boards, the slow rhythm of breath and heartbeat. The foal dozed, head resting against her mother's shoulder. Claire stayed, sketching idle circles in the dirt with one finger, her thoughts looping through memories she'd buried years ago. She had told herself she'd stopped rescuing for closure, that saving others was how she paid her debts to the past. But watching this small creature cling to life reminded her it had always been about something simpler, not letting anything face the dark alone. Eli appeared at the stall door with a mug of coffee. Young, uncertain, still new to the work. "You've been here all night," he said softly. "You should rest." "I will," Claire replied, though she didn't move. The foal stirred, blinking sleepily. She's learning to breathe without fear. I can't leave her halfway through that. He lingered, watching her brush damp straw from the foal's mane. "Why do you stay when you already know how it might end?" Claire smiled faintly. "Because sometimes they stay because we do." Her voice trembled on the last word, and she let the silence that followed hold her answer. By afternoon, the light had shifted, warm, uncertain, filtered through cracks in the old barn's roof. The mare stirred, a low sound rumbling from her throat. The foal lifted her head instantly, ears flicking forward. She pressed her tiny nose to her mother's neck, as though willing her back to strength. The mare's eyes fluttered open, tired but aware. Claire exhaled, her shoulders loosening for the first time in hours. Dr. James reappeared, relief flickering across his face. "That's a good sign. She's fighting." The foal's small tail flicked as she nuzzled her mother's face. Claire smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "So are we." But hope, she knew, was a fragile thing. That evening, as the team prepared to leave, the mare's breathing faltered again. A shallow catch, a sound too soft to notice unless you were close enough to hear it break. Claire froze. The foal lifted her head, listening. One breath, two, then silence. The vet's expression told her what words couldn't. The foal let out a low cry, the kind that split the air, then pressed her face into Claire's lap. Claire didn't speak. She simply rested a hand over the trembling body and stayed still, letting the weight of the moment settle like dust. Outside, the wind whispered through the eaves, carrying away the last echo of the storm. Morning crept in pale and cold, its silence heavier than the storm had ever been. The rescue barn smelled of damp wood and loss. The mare's stall stood empty now, only the imprint of her body left in the straw, a hollow shape like memory. The foal stood at the gate, eyes fixed on the space where her mother had been. She hadn't made a sound since the night before, as though grief had stolen even that. Claire leaned against the doorway, coffee cooling in her hands, unsure whether she was comforting the foal or herself. She had stayed up again, unable to leave the little one alone. The others had gone home, leaving her and the foal in the hush that follows heartbreak. When she reached over the gate, the foal didn't shy away. Instead, she pressed her nose against Claire's wrist, a soft, searching touch. The gesture broke something open in her, a tenderness she had built walls around long ago. She slipped into the stall, crouched low, and whispered, "It's just us now." Dr. James entered quietly, his boots muffled against the straw. "We'll need to find her a foster mare soon," he said, though his tone carried doubt. "Or she won't make it through the week." Claire nodded but didn't look at him. "I'll get her through the week," she murmured. He wanted to argue, but the conviction in her voice stopped him. Some promises didn't need witnesses. They needed to be lived. Through the morning, Claire coaxed the foal toward a bottle. The first attempts failed. The foal refused, turning away stubbornly. Claire didn't force her. She simply stayed near, humming low, a half-forgotten tune that used to calm Embry years ago. By the fourth try, the foal drank, a little, cautious, but enough to keep her standing. When she finished, milk dripped from her muzzle like a child learning how to live again. Claire laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. As the hours passed, the barn filled with a different kind of stillness. Not grief, but quiet endurance. The foal followed Claire's movements, shadow to her shape, steps uncertain but growing braver. When Claire cleaned the stall, the foal nosed the broom. When she turned away, the tiny hooves followed. "You're stubborn," Claire said with a faint smile. "You'll fit right in." At dusk, the rescue team gathered for the mare's burial. The old oak near the stream had become the resting place for countless rescues over the years. The ground was soft, the air cool with the smell of rain still lingering. No one spoke much. Words felt too small for what they were leaving behind. Claire carried the red bandana in her hand, the one she'd used during the rescue, and tied it around the foal's neck before walking to the grave. She knelt, pressing her palm to the fresh earth. "You did good," she whispered. The foal stood beside her, head lowered, watching as if she understood. Eli placed a small wooden marker at the mound's edge, carved with the mare's name. For a long while, no one moved. The creek murmured softly behind them, and the wind stirred the branches overhead, scattering leaves like blessings. When the others drifted away, Claire remained, the foal leaning against her leg. "I used to think saving them was about strength," she said quietly, voice breaking just enough. "But maybe it's about staying, even when there's nothing left to save." The foal blinked, her breath warm against Claire's knee. The sun slipped lower, turning the field to gold. The red bandana fluttered faintly in the breeze. Claire traced the foal's ear with her thumb, realizing she no longer felt the ache of helplessness, only a fragile kind of hope. Behind them, the barn waited, its doors open to the fading light, ready to hold whatever came next. Weeks passed, and the valley began to green again. Rain gave way to softer skies, and the air smelled of wildflowers pushing through thawed earth. The barn, once echoing with loss, filled now with quieter sounds, the creak of wood, the rustle of straw, the soft shuffle of small hooves. The foal, who had once stood trembling in grief, had grown steadier. Her coat shone under the sunlight that slipped through the rafters. Claire had started calling her Whisper, a name that seemed to fit the way she moved, the way she spoke without sound. Every morning, Whisper would wait by the stall door, head tilted, ears twitching at the sound of Claire's boots. It became their ritual. Claire would bring the bottle, humming under her breath, and Whisper would drink greedily, then nuzzle her shoulder in thanks. The barn hands joked that the foal had chosen her mother, and maybe she had. Claire didn't correct them. She had stopped pretending the bond was temporary. Still, the work was relentless. Nights stretched long. Rescues didn't slow. Yet no matter how late she returned, Whisper was always waiting. Sometimes Claire would sit beside her in the straw after everyone had gone, the quiet wrapping around them like a blanket. She'd talk softly, not about the past, but about things that might come. She spoke of green fields, of running without fences, of a day when Whisper wouldn't need her anymore. The foal would lower her head, as if listening, eyes heavy with trust. Dr. James visited often, checking Whisper's progress. "She's thriving," he said one afternoon, watching as the foal trotted after Claire. "Stronger than any of us expected." Claire smiled, though her voice stayed low. She decided to live. I just gave her permission. He looked at her a long moment, recognizing the weight behind those words. "You've done more than that," he said finally. "You gave her back her voice." The days blurred, marked not by tragedy now, but by growth. Whisper began to explore the paddock outside, taking hesitant steps into sunlight. The first time she galloped, Claire stood by the fence, breath caught in her throat. The foal's legs stretched, unsure but free, her mane flashing gold. For an instant, the sight of her running felt like redemption itself, the kind that healed both ways. Eli joined her at the fence, eyes wide. She looks like she's flying. She is, Claire said softly. Some souls only learn to breathe once they've been broken. By early summer, the barn hosted another rescue. 2 injured horses brought in from a nearby floodplain. Whisper watched from her stall, ears flicking, curiosity bright. When one of the new arrivals neighed in distress, she answered with a low, soothing whinny. Claire noticed and smiled. "Looks like someone's learning how to comfort others now," she murmured. Later that evening, Claire wrote a letter for the rescue's annual newsletter. Her handwriting was slow, deliberate. You can't measure what we save by how long it stays. Sometimes, the saving happens in us. She signed it with a quiet satisfaction she hadn't known in years. A week later, the team gathered outside at dusk. The sky blazed in shades of gold and rose, the kind of light that made everything seem holy. Eli brought a small wooden plaque carved with the mare's name. Together, they hung it on the fence near the pasture. Whisper approached, nose brushing the plaque gently, then turned toward Claire. She rested her head against her shoulder, the gesture so tender it silenced everyone. Even the wind seemed to still. Claire closed her eyes, hand resting against the foal's neck. "We did it," she whispered. Whisper blinked, tail flicking lightly. Beyond them, the field glowed, the red bandana fluttering against her coat. For the first time, Claire didn't feel the weight of what had been lost, only the warmth of what remained. As the sun dipped below the hills, she turned toward the barn. "Come on, girl," she said softly. "Let's go home." And together, they walked into the fading light, the quiet between them full of everything words could never hold.